Hey there, welcome to Amazing FBA. This is your host, Michael Veazey. After just over 4 years of podcasting, we're still here. Small audience, but we like to think very happy audience, and some interesting things to share with you today. So we have a 10-part guide that we produced, a PDF guide, so downloadable, readable guide. Very stripped down. We've consolidated a lot of information into what we think is a pretty absorbable but powerful framework, not just to get you started with your first product or something, but to give you the overview of a framework of how to build a private label or even custom product-based business on the Amazon platform. We have looked at the first 3 steps. Today we're going to come on to the 4th one. The first 3 steps, just to quickly recap, number 1 is to model peak performers, to make sure you are modeling. When I say modeling, I don't mean just copy one person who had a success with 1, 2, or even 5, 10 products in one particular time period, often in 2014, somebody who did really, really well with 1 or 2 products. That's a great start. What I've done is synthesize together the work from the 10K Collective, the £1 Million Mastermind, the mentoring clients I've worked with, as well as my own work and that of very capable business partners and sort of associates. So that's really important, who you're modeling, what you're basing it on. I would suggest you base your model, if you like, your business model, on things that have been proven to work consistently over time in different markets, as in different types of product categories, and with different types of business people as well. If you just do something that worked for one person, not very reliable. So that's the first thing. The second step is simply making sure you learn the basics of Amazon via arbitrage, or indeed any other simple way of buying and selling some cheap goods, just to learn your craft of how to ship goods into Amazon, how to deal with Seller Central, that is the back end of Amazon, etc. Amazing how many people are taught to go straight from knowing nothing into order $5,000 worth of product from China and go straight to Amazon without ever sending on Amazon. That makes no sense to me. So that's step 2. Step 3 is the overview of the NSL process, which is probably the closest thing in our processes to the traditional private label process, which is niche, source, launch, or niche is market research, source, go get the products, and launch is how to launch a product on Amazon, as the name implies. The other way of putting it, as an old business coach of mine put it, is find out what they want, go get it, and give it to them, which is reassuringly simple. So that's the NSL process in a nutshell. We're going to dive into the niche research, the sourcing, and the launching parts of the process in the next 2 or 3 episodes of this series. But today we're going to talk about the fact of scaling up one stage at a time, or one phase at a time, as we call it within the private label process world, if you like, or our terminology, our way of thinking, our business model. Bear in mind, our business model, when I talk about that, is not just private label on Amazon. I don't mean that as that. I'm not talking about so much the shape of your finished building once you construct it, but how we construct it. This is a set of scaffolding, if you want to push the building metaphor. The PLP course, or the processes we teach for people who are new to Amazon, or even for those who are firming up a slightly rocky foundation, even if they've got some turnover, a few tens of thousands a month or something, that you really need to have a framework to build a business on, rather than just saying this is what the business will look like when it's finished. Okay, how do we start, and how do we do, what's the next thing, and then how do you grow it from there to actually being more of a finished, recognizable business? And I think the answer is do things in phases. We've already talked about learning retail arbitrage or anything else like that to learn the necessary skills. And if you didn't catch that, then check it out at the blog, amazingfba.com, and then just look for podcast or /blog. So the first phase is that, I call that phase 0, because that's not really a phase where you're constructing a business, but what you are constructing is experience and a skill set, which is really critical, and is so much better. As somebody who was taught badly, I now believe, back in the day in 2014, to go straight into private labeling. My first encounter with Amazon as a sort of online system that I had to interact with was when I had thousands of dollars or thousands of pounds worth of products coming over from China into the USA, which was pretty damn scary and stressful way of doing it. It would have been so much better if I'd been better taught to have just started in the UK, because that's where I'm based. But if you're based in America, do it in America, or most countries, many of the countries of people who listen, such as Canada, Germany, Australia, have their own Amazon marketplace now. So Start locally and ship some stuff in from one of your local shops. Don't even stress about making a profit. It's not about that, right? Selling a few books or some stuff around the house that you need to get rid of, whatever it is about learning the Amazon systems, right? So the real blocks to progress aren't really what you think they are either. So I want to deal with this because, okay, starting with some arbitrage sounds so easy, but most people don't do it. It is easy, but it's a great idea. And here's why. Here's why it's important. The real blocks to progress aren't the traditional things of I don't know what to sell. Yes, of course, you've got to figure out what to sell. And you need a process for that. We will deal with that in the next episode of this series. But the big blocks are, number one, being scared off by making massive errors, multiple thousands of dollars worth, or euros or pounds, or whatever your currency is, and going in circles because of that fear. Right, that's what stops, I reckon, not scientific, but 98% of people ever selling anything on Amazon. Bear in mind when I say 98%, the stats for 2016, I need to get the latest stats for this, but of the, whatever it was, 700 odd thousand Amazon accounts opened in 2016, I think by the end of it, 98.2% were either dormant or were shut down. So nearly everybody does nothing on Amazon, right? And that's because of fear, I believe, and confusion. The second thing is that you spend all your money on one private label product launch. It doesn't go very well. And then that's it. You leave the game because either you're very disappointed or you just run out of money. Right? Neither really works very well. I would say that's like a sort of traditional, I call it the moonshot approach, which is everything is put together. It's lots of money. It's lots of stress. Sure, if you win, it's a big win and it's enormously exciting. But if you lose everything. And it's exactly like the Apollo moonshot sort of projects back in the day, or the Gemini and all those, incredible achievement. But my goodness, a stressful way of doing things. I'm more interested in the sort of way that you can go into space affordably, do what you need to do, come back out. So more like the sort of way that people go up to the space station, or even if you want to push a space metaphor, it's not maybe a coincidence that Jeff Bezos is one of the greatest advocates and people who's pushing for space travel, and he and Tesla, the Tesla guy, Elon Musk, are both pushing for reusable rockets, which you can use, go into orbit affordably, and then come back and land the rocket safely so you can afford to go back and forth multiple times. It's much more cost effective. It's much less high risk. Okay, so what the hell's this got to do with building an Amazon business? Well, it's kind of simple. So we've dealt with phase one, where we learn the real basics. It's a bit like, getting your space capsule and you sit in it within a building at NASA, and you test all the systems without actually flying the aircraft anywhere, but you have people sit in it and live in it for a week or whatever, a month. That's exactly what they've done with people like they're preparing. Maybe one day people will be able to live on a moon base or in Mars. They test it in the Earth terrestrially, and people live in it for up to 2 years, but they don't actually move it. So you can test things, and for Amazon, guess what the test is? It's basically this. Instead of spending, say, £5,000, these are some typical numbers, $5,000 for, say, 1,000 units at $5 a pop of some private label products, because once you've got your label printed on it or unique packaging, the minimum order quantity goes up, so the minimum amount you can spend goes up. Instead of that, you might do, for example, number one, our favorite and most straightforward way of doing things up to this point has been the generic product launch, which is when you grab some products off the shelf, ready to go as they are. They come in whatever packaging they come in. They don't have your logo on. But to be honest, that's not normally that important to the consumer. And what you can do is then ship maybe 100 over at maybe the cost of $1,000 or $800 or whatever it may be, and test the market. And what you can do is get feedback from consumers about the product design. You can see what the actual sort of price point is you can sell for. You can see what the conversion rates are, all those sorts of data that you get from actually selling on Amazon, and you cannot see that from using Jungle Scout, Helium 10, Viral Launch, or any other bit of software that relies on basically taking the bestseller rank and extrapolating all the other data from it. It's very clever, but it's not really insider information. As soon as you have products on Amazon, you get your own data, and that is, I believe, absolutely critical. The other thing you can do is run Amazon ads on products, and then you can start to look at the data from the Amazon ads, which gives you a whole fresh perspective. What keywords are getting clicks on the adverts. That gives you the click-through rate or relevance. So what is likely to be sort of relevant search terms with good search volume, and people like the product for that. That's very powerful information. And of course, the best thing of all, conversions. What keywords drive conversions, actual sales of your product? That's really powerful data, which really, really helps you make a very informed, data-led decision from your own data about whether this is a product to scale up and to go and fully private label, or even create your own customized or tweaked version. Or whether to go, this is a disaster, everyone hates it, don't do it. Or this product type might work, but this particular product from this particular supplier is horrible, don't do it. And it's way better to find that out when you've got 100 units than when you've got 1,000 units. Kind of obvious, right? But it's not something that people teach. I think that's because it's a bit fiddlier to explain it. I can understand why people don't teach it now, because it's more work to explain it. It takes longer, so people don't want to learn. They want to be lazy and quick. Okay, fine. I'm not blaming anyone for wanting to be quick and efficient. But if it's quick and just a fantasy, I don't see the point. So my plea to you is really find ways, be imaginative. If you've got a ready-made system like the private label process course, or if we're working together one-to-one mentoring, great. But if you don't have that, or you want to do it yourself, at least find a way, a middle ground between quick and dirty arbitrage, where you're selling whatever, £50 worth, $50 of the products, even a few dollars worth to start with, just to test your chops out, see how good you are at using the Amazon system. And then that whole private label, or even whatever it is, customized product, whatever it is, at scale launch with several thousand at stake, please try and find that middle ground. It's not that hard. It takes some work, and it is a compromise. So you won't do a full scale launch. You won't get all the data back that you'll need, of course, but it is way better to get some feedback from the marketplace and correct course at a small scale than at a large scale. And this is common sense, by the way. So a couple of reasons from general business building principles why this is a great idea. Number one, if big companies roll things out and they do things in a structured way, they nearly always roll out what they call a pilot of something. So if something's going to be, for example, fast broadband is going to be rolled out by Virgin Broadband, for example, they'll normally roll it out in one particular city. They'll check that the system works. They'll get the bugs ironed out. They get a load of feedback, whether they want it or not, otherwise known as customer complaints. But you must value that, particularly in the early days, because that will help you correct course. Sometimes they'll go, we're good at phones, but actually we tried the broadband thing and we were terrible at that, so we're going to leave that to BT. Or they might say, generally it was successful, people actually adopted it better than we thought, but there were some real problems with X, Y, and Z technical things, so we're going to address that, get it right, get the feedback, refine the system, and only then do they do what's called a rollout, which is when you spread the service over a wider area. Very common with a sort of geographically based service industry, and there's no reason why we can't take a similar approach with products. In fact, we should, in my opinion, because testing something out for less than $1,000, if it doesn't work, unless you've got tiny money, in which case private label won't be the business model for you, then you can do it over 2, 3, 4 more products, and you find the winning product. That's when you scale up. The second point of reference that is way greater than just little old me, and it's amazing that more people don't talk about this in the Amazon community, but I don't find people do, is Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote several great business books, including Good to Great, Great by Choice, which is really, really interesting. And Great by Choice particularly interesting because it deals with companies that grew and dominated and thrived in very topsy-turvy, very uncertain, very fast-changing markets, such as Microsoft back in the day before Apple kind of got back on song, and various other businesses as well. Fascinating book if you're interested in business theory. I don't think it's just purely theoretical, though. I think it's empirically based, i.e. based on evidence, consolidation down to some simple principles, but which are based on facts and the actual trajectories of real companies, not just a nice idea, right? And I really think this is common sense as well. And when I see it applied with my mentoring clients, it works. And when people abuse it, it doesn't work. And that's this. There's a hell of a build-up. That principle is this. It's called, in Jim Collins' language, fire bullets, then fire cannonballs. So this is, you imagine that you're at a sort of naval battle back in the day, and if you're the sort of English army fighting the Spanish Armada in the English Channel back in the 16th century, whatever, you got your cannons, right? And it's very tempting when you've got a big thing at stake, in this case, winning a war or winning a battle, to put all of your gunpowder into the so for gunpowder, read money, by the way, or effort, into a big cannon and fired a couple of big cannonballs. And of course, if you've calibrated, if they're pointing exactly the right direction and right height, you sink the enemy battleship, game over, you've won. That's great. Now, the bit that people often miss, and which massively increases risk, is to go straight to that point. Because if you get it wrong, you spend all of your firepower on that cannonball, it missed, now you've got no gunpowder left, game over. If the other side has still got cannonballs and does a better job than you, they win, you lose. Right? Instead of which, the simple idea, which is exactly the sort of way that people actually work in good companies that have survived uncertain times, uncertain markets, is that they fire bullets, and they may be a bit too high, so you adjust downwards, and it may be to the left, so you adjust to the right, and you move it until you've calibrated correctly that the bullet is landing correctly, and only then, along the same trajectory, you fire a cannonball. Now, you might argue from a physics point of view that a bullet's going to fly differently than a cannonball, and you'd be right. But you're going to get a lot closer if you calibrate with bullets and then try with a couple of cannonballs. That's the way to go, rather than just putting all of your hope into one thing. Otherwise known as a Hail Mary bet, I guess, in American business culture, which means you just kind of pray and put a big bet on. This is not smart strategy. And this is basically the traditional way that people have been taught to do private labeling on until now for some reason. It's a lot easier to teach, but it's just not good business strategy in the broader sense. And to be specific, I've seen so many people come to grief. Mostly, as I say, they just don't do anything because they're terrified, rightly so in a way, or they fire all of their, they use up all their gunpowder on one big cannonball that misses, i.e. they choose a product or a keyword that wasn't winnable. So they choose a keyword market where they couldn't win, like, I don't know, baby towels. I mean, it's just too generic. You're never going to be at the top of page, 5 for that. Or they choose a good keyword, but their product sucks. I know the quality is bad, or the quality is good and the keyword is good, but it's just overpriced. If you don't get these things right, then obviously it's kind of game over for that product. So it's a really simple thing to say. It's more pain to do. It takes longer. It means you've got to be patient, because instead of launching your sexy private label, look at me, I'm going to become rich product within 3 months, you may have to spend a bit more time doing proper quality research. And I don't mean just spending your life on Jungle Scout. I mean talking to real people. We talked about this before. We'll talk about it again. My hint, talk to real people with real problems and find real solutions. Right? If you can do that and then go and get a product that really solves things for you people, you're already ahead of the game. And then don't assume that your understanding of the market is correct. Test it on a moderate scale. And only then scale up the winners and leave the losers. And honestly, it's such a robust strategy. As long as you get enough money set aside, it's just almost a guaranteed win. But you just need to have the patience to implement it, because you're going to have to take longer, and you have to admit, God forbid, the possibility of failure on a micro level. If you admit the possibility of a failure on a micro test product by product basis, ironically, you massively increase the probability, even the certainty, of winning overall with your business over time. Right? And it's one of those things you have to be a bit more grown up about to embrace this business model. I'm fortunate and happy that quite a few people are now buying the PLP course and really appreciate the kind of dose of honesty that comes with that. And not everyone pursues it. I mean, you always have the 80-20 rule apply. So 80% of people buy courses and never read them. 20% of those read it but don't put stuff up online. So there's only ever a certain percentage of people that take action. I'm glad to say quite a few mentoring clients and some of the PLP course members have taken action, and it really, on the basis of this, it's really removed the barrier for them so they can get moving without that fear holding them back. And that's probably the best thing of all, because the greatest tragedy isn't really losing a few $1,000s on a product that doesn't work. It seems like it at the time, but go forward 5-10 years, I don't think it probably makes much difference financially. But what's really happened that's a tragedy in that case is that they have missed out on building a business. Even if they weren't ultimately going to build the biggest e-commerce business, they've missed out on this skill set and the mindset that they would have developed by building a business. E-commerce isn't the only area of business I'm interested in, but I'm absolutely grateful that I took the plunge and got going with it. And I'm grateful that I was able to overcome the fact that I was working with a very flawed business building model. And I'm glad to be able to come back from that and to offer you something which I think is more realistic and works better and has a better chance of success. So that's what I have to say on that. It's really not a sexy topic, but it's really basic business building strategy. It's proven by the big boys, as you like. It's proven by the people in e-commerce that I know and in Amazon selling that I know. It's proven by great companies that Jim Collins has analyzed, and he also analyzed the opposite and saw how bad that was. So it really is a solid piece of advice. It's not just my idea. And it's great that I see it being validated more and more by my clients, and I'd be delighted if you could join them in that journey of building a real sustainable business over time that wins over time. And that's the key. You've got to be a bit patient in this game as well as hustling. It's a funny combination. And I think that combination of being willing to wait for results a bit, but hustling like crazy, that's the winning combination for any entrepreneur. And this strategy demands that mindset. And if you got that, I think you're really ahead of the game, and it's not something anyone else can copy either, because it's mostly in your head. It's pretty simple, but it's pretty profound as well. Thanks very much for listening. Hope you find this as exciting as I do. This stuff is exciting because although it's simple, most people don't know it, and therefore most people don't do it. Even if they know it, they don't do it. So it really can put you ahead of the pack. And it's not some hack that somebody else can copy or that's going to change next month. It's strategy that is true now and will be true next year and next decade. So I love that kind of stuff. In a world where everything changes, I'm looking for the thing that doesn't change. And this is one of those principles that is timeless. Thanks very much for listening.